Hello, I'm Janet Price. I'm an Honorary Research Fellow at the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, and I'm really sorry not to be there in Canada with you today. However, what I wanted to talk to you about is people-centred health systems for disabled people, an issue that sounds fairly straightforward because clearly health systems ought to be open to and centred around the needs of disabled people. And yet if you said this to many of my disabled friends around the world, they'd laugh at you, for people-centred, and by implication therefore disability-friendly, is the last thing that many health systems are. However, there are many changes taking place, and one of the things that's beginning to happen is the building of partnership between health services and disabled people's organisations. Now, a number of years ago, the WHO put out a guidance note. It was around sexual and reproductive health services, but for people with disabilities. And the lessons in this are relevant to many of the issues that I'm going to talk about today. It was talking about, first of all, establishing relationships between disabled people's organisations and the health service. The need to build a really strong relationship. Now, one of the things that always strikes me in this piece of advice is that the people who are relating to disabled people's organisations are those people who are confident in their identity as disabled. Those who are ashamed of it are the ones who will not be in those organisations. And it is often these, the most isolated people, that are the ones that we need to reach. They may not even have a notion that their bodily impairment links to an identity of disability or to any barrier or critiques that society may have about the ways in which they are treated. So how do you make contact with disabled people beyond the organisations? Almost inevitably the ones who face the greatest poverty and stigma and discrimination. I'd like to introduce you to Gatoni, an activist based in Kenya who had set out to explore the intersections of disability with sexuality. For the disability community, this is an unspoken issue, much as being gay or lesbian was in the days before legalisation. It's a fundamental issue of rights and of fear and silence.
I am Gatoni Blesso. I am a queer social rights activist. I have mostly worked in Kenya in both grassroots organizing, ideologies, innovations, practices, etc., etc. And we walked into a constituency of people who said, yeah, you're gay and so what? And that threw us off balance. And we walked into a space where we could not say now we are looking for people living with disabilities, but also LGBTIQ. So it was not a safe space. So we walked in first with a very human right-based approach, which we were hoping that was going to take care of the disability angle and take care of the LGBTIQ angle. And then we found a people who really did not care about this because we did not seem to talk about concrete issues that are affecting them in society. And we could not have just walked into a space and because we had asked both agencies that organize within these particular areas to mobilize. We could not walk in and assume that all these people were gay. All these people had these sexual identities. There was people with religious values and all these other things that came out in the end, but also was encompassed in a beautiful way to just discuss sexuality as a state of being. And in this state, we were then forced to work backwards, to say notes aside, yes, and let's start talking. And the lessons that we got from this process were amazing. From the ownership of within the people living with disabilities, from these discriminative processes, how they had formed agency, how they had formed language around sex, how they understood sexuality. The best I found was when we asked in a room what they understood by sexual identity or what sexuality was, and I was told it's just being. And to me, that was just a beautiful existence of saying that this is a stance that tells me I don't need to exist in identity, but I can be like a pluralistic existence, knowing that yes, my sexual identity is part of my life, but there's a whole lot of existence that comes with the person that I am. And we had activities that were about walk of life, and we discussed the issue of class marginalization, and we discussed the issue of like cultural discrimination. We discussed the issue of, for instance, young children who are hidden from when they're very young from society, and families taking advantage of them. There was a case of a young girl who the father had hidden her from the society and had taken her up as much like a sex slave. And we started now looking at how also sex has been used as a form of violence.
So Gatoni engaged with a group, some of whom have a much more fluid understanding of their identity, who don't necessarily wish to be called gay or disabled or queer, who struggle with how to face the intersections alongside of the experience of their embodiment, of a disability often due to illness, whether common like HIV or TB, or rarer but locally found like lymphatic filariasis or river blindness. But disability is an inevitable consequence and linked to the struggle for survival. And so with disability comes the challenge to community norms, to what is seen as right and proper. But it's from this notion of right and proper, that prejudice and stigma is engendered. Health workers have to be open as people to confront such changing situations within their lives, to be able to take on board the notions of disability, to support disabled people through those neglected health problems, to reach out to otherwise isolated disabled people. So you need health systems that respond along with these links. And how do you build the disability and awareness and access within the health system? Now, I could give you multiple references and checklists of how to change policies to build physical access into a system, ramps, sign language interpreters, braille. But these all need to be accompanied by an awareness of the issues from managers and medical staff, so that they're tuned in to picking up the issues of disability or potential disability from whatever angle it may reach them. Now, colleagues in India shared with me the following story of Shobha.
मी 16 वयात मी कामाला लागले आणि डॉक्टरच्या हाताखाली कंपाऊंडर म्हणून काम केलं. ते 2 वर्ष केलं. ते मला ते पेशंट बोलायला ऐकायला ना मग माझं मला समजायला लागलं की मला स्वतःला ऐकायला येत नाही वाटत. चुकीचं नाव लिहायला लागलो. मग डॉक्टर खवळला. हे काय चुकीचं नाव लिहायला लागल्यास आणि तुला काय प्रॉब्लेम आहे? सर म्हटलं मला ऐकायला कमी येतं. हे आता आम्हाला सांगितलं पहिलं सांगायचं होतीस. 18 वर्ष पूर्ण झाल्यावर मी धंद्यात पडलो आणि ते मग पुढचं मग काय होतं मला ऐकायला कमी येते का? तर होय हो जरा ऐकायला कमी येतं. अहो मग कान तपासून घ्या. म्हणून तर माझ्या लक्षात आलं माणूस काहीतरी चांगलं सांगते. जाऊन कान तपासून घेऊन मशीन घातलं. पहिलं कसं मी दाखवून ते मशीन होतं की कस्टमर किती घेतीस आणि असं काय काय विचारत ते मी लवकर हा एवढंच करणार. आता सगळ्याची मशीन घालूनच बोलणं. शेवटी मी पण बाई आहे. मला पण सेक्सची भावना आहे. मग त्यामुळे म्हणलं मालक पण नको किंवा नवरा पण नको. हे धंद्यातच बरं आहे. का 2 पैसे मिळते, सेक्स मिळते.
For Shobha, the consequences of her hearing loss not having been addressed, not having been recognised by a doctor for whom she was working, were major. Loss of a job, the shift to sex work, and it was only through the awareness of a customer that she learned of and was able to acquire a hearing aid. Now, one of the lessons I think of this particular example is that the standards to which we hold the private practice, the private medical sector, should be no less than the standards to which we hold our public health services. So how do we reach out and serve disabled people? We need to ensure that each programme has addressed how it will do this, how it will mainstream. Now, this is a word that we're very familiar with. It's a catchy term, and we've become very capable, unfortunately, of ignoring it over the years. But the basic message, however, is that whatever service or programme we're running, we must consider how within it to serve the needs of disabled people so that they're receiving the same quality of care at the end point as experienced by non-disabled people. Staff may require training to raise awareness of prejudice, stigma, and the lack of knowledge. For example, one of the common areas in which you find staff lacking is when it comes to reception of news, of good news in health. So disabled women who go to obstetric services to declare that they're pregnant are often met with disgust, horror, and offers of how to organise an abortion, whereas what they wanted was joy at their news of a pregnancy. So that type of story is one I hear from disabled women right across the world. And it's one that needs training and support to change the attitudes and misconceptions of staff. It's something that you need to work on over time, not something that you can deal with by anger with your staff. If we have disability-specific programmes, we need to ensure that they are not orphan programmes, neglected, under-resourced and poorly staffed. The experience of Ruth tells us a lot about both the worst and best of such services. Now, Ruth became ill in 1998. She went into denial, then had counselling, and she was okay until someone tried to kill her, an event which sparked an underlying psychotic illness. Very frightened, she went to hospital, and here is what happened.
My name is Ruth Mkhari. Nawana wambiri, firstborn yami na 23 years. Vere vanhu ana nga swi twi ku va vulavula yini kumbe yini va nhlanganane ngopfu ku ri ku na yini kumbe ku humelela yini ana nga swi twi a ni hlanganane ngopfu hi leswi swi nga za swi endla ku ni sungula ku vabya. Mina hanya kahle na vona va swi amukela lava ku na vabya ku na vo va vabya hinkwavo va hlangahlangananile na vona mara loyi wa vumbirhi loyi hi a ri na mavabyi ya ku wa rivalela ku sesa ha ri ntsongo hi loyi a tiva ku wa vabya se loyi wo sungula loyi swi lo ta na yena hikuva a ni va kandriya kwale Johannesburg va ya phela ni biwa ni endla swilo leswi hinkwaswo kwale xibedhlele ku vulavula mhaka leyi ku ri manese lawa nga ku kumbe xana a ni a va tarile laha ka fayili leyi fayili ya ko va yi lahlile swi va ha tsalangi swona a yi tsariwile hala handle ku ri a ni la ku dlaya boyfriend ku nga twisiseki and loko a ni nga ni tiphilisi swa pfuna and loko no za ni vulavula hi swona nkarhi wo leha se va ni sa xibedhlele va ku na vanhu swa ku va ku sweswi ni lo tshama mara na sweswi na dila la hena na sweswi kahle sweswi a ni na meni va ni ri kahle na meni loko ni kha ni na tiphilisi a ni holovi na munhu kota ku lehisa mbilu swa ku taniya naswona nkarhi loya loko hi tritiwa ku vava leyi exibedhlele ni boheleriwa na swibandhichi swa ku taniya kanharhu ku na leti nwiwaka na madyambu to ta dronga ku va khoma wu rhongo ti nwiwa kan'we ntsena leti tata ti-ephilimi ni nwiwa kambirhi na nayiti ni tlhaviwa kan'we n'hwetini sweswi na hi tlhava hi thekisi yi tlhave hi tingani ni nga ka hambana ha swi tivi tinyana hi ti-8 hi tlhave hi ti-8 eya tlhava hi thekisi.
So Ruth faced the worst that a health service can offer, but she also faced the best. She's now living at home, has a family and support network around her, and has said, I'm living a healthy life and taking my treatment at home as prescribed. I have a good relationship with staff at the hospital where I collect my treatment, have my injections. So whenever I feel like I'm not thinking straight, I can just go there and communicate with the doctor. It's towards these types of services and care that we need to be working. But the needs and demands within disability care can change rapidly, as within other areas of healthcare. We need to be looking at policy, at law, at budgets. We need to be touching upon new approaches to how we help disabled people make their needs felt. But within this, I think there's one skill that we don't talk about enough, and that's advocacy. Good advocates who can argue for legal change and implementation, for good policies, for new money to be allocated. Over the course of this year, I've worked with a group of feminist advocates who, within the disability, sexual and human rights movements, were trying to address the complications of the spread of Zika virus and the apparent increase in microcephaly as a consequence of this. Within this period, a new political space has opened up in which disabled and non-disabled feminists have at last found ways of talking together around sexual rights, an area which in the past has just provoked silence, distrust and animosity. Particularly, I think this has come up around the areas of abortion in the event of potential fetal impairment. But new conversations have been initiated exploring commonalities and ways of working together.
Show up where we get all these positive judgments from the highest courts, allowing girls with, women or young girls with disabilities to abort at very high weeks of gestation. We know that there is a lot of support for increasing the gestational limits for women to be able to abort up to 24 weeks if severe abnormalities are detected. So I just wanted kind of your insights, Anita, because you've been so much a part of that conversation in the last 2 decades.
No, I think Renu has already mentioned all these concerns, but I think from what I recall, and of course, this last week, of course, is a very, very different week. So I can't say whether it would remain kind of, the same pattern or not, because I feel that, and Renu's already spoken about the political economy. I also have one concern which is there, because, somewhere we are also in this neoliberal times, we are also into this insurance kind of a age. And many people, and I know many countries, I think Katrina will vouch out for the fact that many of the doctors actually are taken to the court if they were to kind of give a little positive way of kind of having a fetus which who would be disabled, and then they would kind of say that why did you kind of give us a positive viewpoint, because then they would have to kind of, the doctors would have to pay for it, in that particular sense. So I know that it's a very complex issue, because on one hand the doctors would say that, look, disability is it's very, very harsh reality, that life is very difficult for them. So when we kind of, people with different kinds of disabilities can have complex feelings about the prenatal screening test. Some people can kind of think of a kind of genocide, right? And some others with disability might simply choose to use the screening test because they feel that they would want to avoid the disabled child.
As Katrina says, that we can go on to look, I think, at ways of moving beyond simple responses to policies, look at much more complex and nuanced ways of moving forward that we need to see within our health communities and health systems, working with other groups, disability rights groups, feminist health organisations, human rights economists, reaching out beyond our usual areas of comfort so that we can look at things from within different perspectives, see the needs and inequalities within the systems. Finally, I want to say a little bit about the importance of research, about whether it be foundational epidemiological research, as is needed around Zika and was fundamental to stopping the Ebola epidemic, or research that looks at the use of that calls for a change and proposals for implementing new approaches. It was because of a combination of these types of researches that firstly there was a recognition that deaf people were at greater risk of HIV and STIs. They weren't receiving health education and thus didn't see themselves as a potential target. But organisations like VCT Liverpool in Kenya recognised that there was a need here, pulled together the research establishing both the service provision and the epidemiological sides of that, and have been able to offer a fully accessible service to both deaf people and to disabled people. So you get something that takes on a much broader picture. From a different angle, CREA, who are the colleagues I've talked about quite a bit who are based in India, had set up a project working with young women around their needs around sexual and reproductive health rights. They recognised that all young women had access to mobile phones in rural areas, whether their own phones or those of their girlfriends. And so they've set up a system whereby they provide information, modules of different types of information around sexual and reproductive health down the phones that the girls can ring in for. But they began to get inquiries about the disabled sisters and brothers and cousins, and so have been able to meet what was actually initially an unrecognised need of those disabled people, and they're able to put that news, that information, out down their mobile phone modules. So research can come from different directions in different ways and meet different needs. What I've hoped to do in this presentation, and with the support of colleagues and friends from around the world, is just show you a little bit of the different types of initiatives that are taking place, the things that activists are working around, and the ways in which those initiatives can link in with health systems and help them see better ways of providing services to people with disabilities. Many thanks.